Welcome to you. Let's begin with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's post on X. Here's what she wrote. Here's what went down. We just want a clean 45-day Gov extension, stripped GOP's earlier 30% cuts to Social Security, admin, etc., staved off last-minute anti-immigrant hijinks, and averted shutdown for now. People will get paychecks, and Marjorie Taylor Greene threw a tantrum on the way out. Win-win. Do you agree with that in its entirety?
I do, and I'm proud of Leader Jeffries and our entire caucus. I mean, we basically got all of the funding that the Democrats wanted. We averted cuts to school funding, cuts to food stamps, cuts to Medicare or Medicaid, and we avoided the draconian provisions that they wanted for folks coming here for seeking asylum. So we have kept the government open, and I credit our leadership and our caucus for remaining unified and disciplined.
Does the stopgap bill not include any aid to Ukraine? Because Republicans have been suggesting any future aid be tied to a border security provision. And that was also left out of the continuing resolution. So considering the House is so far apart on solutions to the border problem, do you worry about Ukraine funding at risk?
I am somewhat concerned, and I was disappointed it wasn't included. The reason is we had a lot of votes on Ukraine funding through the appropriations process, and you have about 300 to 320 members, including me, who are voting for that funding, and you know that the Senate wants it. So here you have a minority in the House thwarting the will of the majority. And what I've said to folks is, look, we can disagree about Ukraine's strategy, but if you yank the aid today, you're basically giving Putin license to march into Kiev. How is that a good solution? You want to push for diplomacy, you want to push to get towards a ceasefire, fine, but there's no way you can yank the aid before that. So I do believe we're going to get there, and it's unfortunate that they've thrown politics into foreign policy.
But let me ask you about something, and this was discussed on the show yesterday with your colleague from California, Representative Sarah Jacobs, who said that the Senate CR, when they were talking about funding for Ukraine, right, that which a lot of Republicans are now opposed to due to the cost, she said that was in the CR, and it was actually just to fund replenishing the supplies were there to be an attack on the U.S. homeland. It wasn't money that was going to Ukraine. It was money that was just keeping our borders and everything within safe. Is that true? And if so, what are the Republicans not reading with that?
Well, I believe that the Senate CR, I'd have to look at it, but there were many iterations. I do think that they initially had more funding for Ukraine, what the administration had requested. And I know Senator McConnell is for it, as is the majority of the Senate. But what you see is increasing opposition among Republicans in the House and among Republicans in the Senate. It's still a minority of their own caucus, I'd say 40%. But what this suggests is that we're going to have to really be strong in our advocacy that this is in America's national interest, that you can't have Putin go march into Kiev and not expect bad consequences for America. It would allow China to march into Taiwan as a precedent. It would just undermine the rules-based order that keeps Americans safe. Democrats need to make that case to the American public.
So Kevin McCarthy, the House pulled this off yesterday with a lot of support from Democrats. Was that ever in question given the options?
Well, I do appreciate that the Speaker finally stood up to a far right-wing group that was really going to hurt the American people. I mean, can you imagine that members of Congress were going to get paid and our troops weren't, that our federal employees weren't, that you would have had parks shut down, that you would have had air traffic controllers not be paid? It was outrageous. And so he did finally do that, and he basically gave the Democrats all that we wanted, and that I credit Leader Jeffries and our leadership team. It was unclear whether he was going to play games with the CR. He didn't, thanks to our leadership, and this was a win for the American people. But the Democrats can't rest on our laurels. We need to continue to work constructively to help the American people.
Well, you heard the president say how difficult it is that this keeps happening, the way everything happens and gets accomplished, and you go right up to the brink, and it's frustrating and it's unnecessary, and it doesn't make the United States of America look good. It does a lot of risk as well to our standing economically. So here's the question. We have 45 days for this stopgap measure. Is it just setting us up for repeat chaos ahead of November 17? What needs to happen between then and now?
Well, the president's absolutely right. I mean, have deep ideological conflicts, but don't take this to the brink where you're threatening shutdown or default. I do think, though, that something important happened here. McCarthy, for the first time, passed something that was bipartisan. He got Democratic votes, and that gives me hope that we are going to be able to be more constructive because he's not going to all the time be held hostage by a very few. And I also think that this was the first moment of leadership for our new team, Hakeem Jeffries, Catherine Clark, and Pete Aguilar, and they came off with flying colors. I mean, they are as good as any previous generation of leaders, and I'm really proud of them in our caucus.
Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz said this morning he plans to launch the process to oust Speaker McCarthy from his leadership post. Take a listen to what he said.
I actually think Democrats are going to bail out Kevin McCarthy. If at this time next week Kevin McCarthy is still Speaker of the House, it will be because the Democrats bailed him out, and he can be their Speaker, not mine.
Would you consider voting to save McCarthy if it comes to that, and under what circumstances?
Well, we're going to follow our leader, Hakeem Jeffries. The caucus is going to figure things out and what to do. But there are a lot of options. I mean, there could be some members who vote to table a motion. You don't have to actually vote for Kevin McCarthy to make sure that the House continues to function. What I do believe will happen is Hakeem Jeffries will help come up with a strategy that puts the American people first, and the Democrats will be unified, as we usually have been, as we were the last 2 years under Speaker Pelosi, where we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, biggest climate legislation, passed infrastructure, the biggest infrastructure bill in 20 years, bringing semiconductor manufacturing home with the CHIPS Act. That's how you govern. And one of the reasons is, despite all the media stories of Democratic disarray, we actually were unified. We continue to be unified.
You know about the investigation now underway after New York Democrat Jamal Bowman was caught pulling the fire alarm ahead of the House vote yesterday. So he issued an apology saying, "I'm embarrassed that I admit that I activated the fire alarm, mistakenly thinking it would open the door. I regret this and sincerely apologize for any confusion it caused." Is that plausible? And then what do you say to Republicans who just jumped on this saying, oh, he should face an ethics investigation for creating a delay voting and be expelled?
We need some humanity around here. We don't have to make everything a personal attack. I try to refrain from personal attack against Republican colleagues. I'm here to do things to help the American people. He's explained himself. He's apologized. And I think it's time to move on to things that are affecting the lives of the American public.